Hey friends, I'm Christy and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall even when it makes waves. We are talking about hormonal health over the next few episodes, and next generations of women can thank us that we are having these hard conversations about what we are going through as perimenopausal and menopausal women. I am going through it myself, so I have amazing experts here to help you understand every aspect of that journey, and I am excited to bring these episodes to you now. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to remind you that there are a few spots remaining on the upcoming Thrive with Christy retreats. We have April 17th through 19th happening in Texas and June 14th through 18th happening just outside Truckee, California. I would love to see you there. You can learn more at thrivewithchristy.com. That's CHRISTY.com/retreats. I am so excited for my guest today. A friend of mine sent me Ashleigh's way. She sees Ashleigh in Florida, and I follow Ashleigh and all of her content about midlife and hormonal health. So I am thrilled to have you here, Ashleigh.
Thanks for
Tell
having
us
me.
a little bit about what you do.
I'm Ashleigh Auth. I'm a physician assistant, and I stepped away from corporate medicine a little over a year ago, and opened my own menopausal clinic. I do work all in gynecology. I see women of all ages, but my passion is working with women that are between that 35 to 55 year, really struggling hormonally, mental health, all the things, working with them from nuts to bolts, if you would, on all things midlife. So
Yes, great. And it's
positive,
positive care.
positive women's care, like menopause, but a positive approach. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And every piece of content you put out, like, oh, she's speaking to me. And all of this month is about women's hormone health. So I have talked to my friend who is a nutritionist in women's midlife, and I was excited to talk to you and understand a little bit, kind of breaking down HRT, which I know is an area of expertise for you. Why don't we just talk about the basics of what is happening in our body in perimenopause and then menopause?
Sure. So, what is perimenopause and menopause? Menopause, by definition, is just 12 months no menstrual cycle. Obviously, women can go through surgical menopause where their ovaries come out, and not just your uterus. You can still have a hysterectomy and not be menopausal. It's really just the removal of the ovaries. You can have medical menopause where, like, someone that's on tamoxifen or another treatment of breast cancer or other things, and it kind of shuts down ovarian function. But naturally, menopause in the United States happens for women on average about age 51. So that's an arbitrary number. And then perimenopause is really the window of time before that. So rewind 7 to 10 years, a woman is what we call perimenopausal. And the problem with that term and those dates is that we don't know truly that someone is perimenopausal until we know when they're menopausal, and then we backtrack and say, oh yeah, you were probably in perimenopause. There's no fancy lab test or way to diagnose a perimenopausal woman except for I just feel off and my symptoms are
Mm.
starting to creep up on me and things are different in my body. And on average, I usually say late 30s, early 40s, most women are likely in perimenopause.
Okay. What are those early symptoms that women might start to notice?
One of the bigger symptoms, which happened for me at age 37, so I can attest to this, was brain fog. I was in a busy clinic, seeing patients every 10 minutes, like most of us do in medicine, and I would review a patient's chart and had no clue why I was walking into the room. I had a patient once that just said it feels fuzzy in there. Brain fog is really, really common. It's just not that we have too many things on our plate. It's hard to contain those things that we've always been able to deal with. Other symptoms that I see really commonly in perimenopause are sleep issues. So some women will have difficulty falling asleep. A lot of women will have cortisol spikes around 2, 3 a.m. I joke that I have a club
Mm.
of those patients, and my goal is to get them out of that club. But that's a big one, waking up in the middle of the night and then not easily being able to fall back to sleep. Mood disturbances. So a lot of women in midlife are being placed on antidepressants, and I do think there's a time and place for that, which we can get into, but I think it's not always the best move. And the reason for a lot of this is mostly progesterone issues that happen early on. And then later signs or signs of menopause, aside from just lack of cycle, tend to be things like my period's more irregular, maybe it's heavier and I'm having it twice a month or really heavy flow, or I'm starting to skip cycles, which I've always had a pretty normal cycle before. That can be a sign of later perimenopause. Hot flashes or night sweat, that's usually closer to menopause when we see that. These are estrogen shifts. I could keep going. The whole talk of this hour could be about symptoms, but I tell women head to toe. So if your
Okay.
hair's falling out and your ears are itchy and your skin is dry, your period is different, your mood is different, your sleep is different. I mean, there are over 75 symptoms that we think could be related
Wow.
directly to a hormonal change.
I had no idea because
Yeah.
I always jump straight to the big ones. I had hot flashes and
Hmm.
night sweats for a pretty short time. I feel a little fortunate, and it might have been because I was using the Mirena IUD, and I've
Hmm.
been very vocal about everything that happened to me after the removal of that and
Yeah.
now everything that went a little bit crazy. I think it definitely helped with some symptoms leading up to that last year, but the night sweats for me were pretty short-lived, thankfully, hot flashes, but gosh, I knew exactly what they were when they were happening because
Sure.
they are like nothing else.
Some women will describe them almost like an anxiety attack, like it's this internal heat or emotion that just kind of comes up on them, and doesn't matter if it's snowing outside. It's not, let's make the room cooler, because that doesn't change if a hot flash is happening.
Ugh, yeah, I run cold, so I'm always
Mhm.
cold, and so for me to be just feeling like flushed and like I was gonna break out in a sweat and throwing the covers off, I never sleep without covers.
Yeah.
So yes, I was familiar with that one. Certainly the brain fog, and that's like you said, hard to discern between I have a lot going on or a lot on my plate
Hmm.
and wow, there's really something going on cognitively. So,
Sure.
can birth control mask those symptoms to some degree, or how do you see that play out with women either using that or not?
So let's talk really quick about the difference between hormone or menopausal hormone therapy and birth control. Birth control is meant for contraception, so it can prevent pregnancy. And then hormonal therapy is really not a contraception. So it's not going to help with a lot of times period changes and cycle changes or contraceptive means. So if a
Right.
I talk to patients all the time, like, you're 39, you can still easily get pregnant. We got to make a decision. If your husband or partner's had a vasectomy, amazing. But if not, what do we want to do? I think the other big misconception is that all hormones are created equal, which they are absolutely not. Birth control is really synthetic hormones. We're talking about synthetic estrogens, synthetic progestins, which are very different than
Okay.
estradiol and progesterone that we use menopausally. With that being said, they are suppressing our hormones. But because they're suppressing our hormones, they're keeping them relatively stable. So a lot of women are like, I just kind of coast into menopause. I was on birth control and I stopped having my period and then I got off my birth control. And absolutely, if you feel stable, you do not need to be on hormone replacement in perimenopause. We're really just treating symptoms. You mentioned the Mirena IUD. I have a Mirena IUD. I don't get my period. It's lovely. Not everyone will not get a period on it, but cycle changes and things like that are probably irrelevant for me, right? Whereas if I was having horrible sleep or my mood was terrible, the IUD is not going to affect those things because it's actually suppressing our natural progesterone levels as opposed to improving our natural levels. So I think it really is just specific to the symptom on, is birth control ideal for that patient or is it not ideal? I also see a lot of young girls, even in their 20s, that start having vaginal issues and dryness and pain with sex and UTIs. And we call it genital urinary syndrome of menopause because obviously hormones affect every organ system and definitely our pelvic floor. And in cases like that, it's not that they're menopausal, but the birth control is suppressing their estrogen so much. Now they don't have good vaginal moisture or their tissue
Mm.
quality is changing, just like they had a baby and their estrogen dropped. We just have to be careful on what is the reason they're on birth control, if it's really for contraceptive purposes. And then sometimes we can even stack, which I won't go too much into that, but we can stack things like a Mirena IUD with an estrogen patch or, kind of use things in combination that are birth control and non-birth control.
Okay. And yeah, so that's interesting because I didn't know where one ends and the other begins. And
Yeah.
like I said, having removed my Mirena last year, thinking, oh, I'll just let everything run its course because I went 10 years without a
Everything
period
natural.
also. So I just said, well, I wonder what my body will do, what's going on in
Yeah.
there without the synthetic hormones. And so I went for several months before I really started to feel off the rails crazy and
Yeah.
going through all the shifts. And then it's been a little bit of a struggle for me with HRT, but we'll talk about the different options and things there. I'm curious because when we talk about hormonal health and the hormonal changes, we're talking about more than estrogen and testosterone. I hear a lot about cortisol and some of these other
Mhm.
hormones.
So I always like to say estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are the three main hormones, obviously, that I focus on in my clinic. But when those hormones are changing, so is every single thing in our body. So our cortisol starts to peak. Hence, I mentioned waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning. And when our progesterone was nice and balanced, it prevented the cortisol from peaking or spiking. Our thyroid levels start to go off. Or like, I've never had a thyroid problem until I turned
Mm.
40. Well, guess what? If your estrogen's off, your thyroid's probably off. I mean, hormones kind of work in sync that way. In my practice, I do a lot of like holistic women's care. So I don't just treat hormones, I treat the patient as a whole. And I always say, let's just get annual preventative labs. Let's look at everything. The other thing that I see, not just cortisol and those hormones, but like our lipids start to creep up. So triglycerides, total cholesterol will start increasing in perimenopause, and that is because our body is really, really smart. Even though everyone thinks our body's failing us, it's really smart, especially the female body. I don't think we get enough credit. And our body knows how to make estrogen in 3 ways. The first way is in our ovary. And when that starts to shut down or is really wonky and it's high, low, all over the place, then we start making estrogen through the cholesterol pathway, which naturally will increase cholesterol. So a lot of my patients, I'll say, let's put you on some HRT, specifically estrogen, and I watch their cholesterol go back to normal.
Wow.
And the third way is estrone, which is deep visceral fat. So our body can make estrogen in adipose tissue that likes to happen right in that midsection, which is where no one wants it. So classically, probably 75% of the patients I see will come in and say, I've always had a flat belly. I'm still eating the same. I'm still exercising the same. And I have a tire around my waist. And I'm like, welcome to lack of estrogen because your body is doing what it thinks it should be doing. And again, that's not the kind of estrogen we want.
That explains so much. And I unfortunately have not always had a flat belly, but definitely the areas where it has liked to collect are definitely a little fluffier now. So and that same 10 pounds that I put on, take off, put on, it doesn't want to come off now with some
Yeah. And
extra
sometimes we're
without.
working harder, right? We're eating cleaner and we're exercising more and our weight is creeping.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
Before we get into HRT, what are
Mhm.
some lifestyle changes that
Yeah.
women can take during this time?
Biggest one I say is treat yourself like you're a teenager or a new baby. Because just like in those times where our body is growing and changing, so it is in midlife. We should be sleeping good, restful sleep, 7.5 to 8 hours a night. Many of us were moms or are moms, and we were like, well, I can function on a good 5 hours. Not
Mm.
true. I have two teenagers and two little ones in my house. And if my teenagers are functioning on 5 hours of sleep, we have a problem. So
Right.
that's the same thing with midlife women, right? Like they cannot function on little sleep. So getting good sleep, getting a good, again, I could talk a whole podcast on that, but sleep hygiene, dark, cold room, putting your phones away, it can wait till tomorrow. I'm a medical provider and I still put my phone away. So you can too. We're our worst enemies when it comes to sleeping. So that's my biggest thing. Fueling your body. So again, just like we feed newborn babies and our teens have to be fed really well, so do women, especially midlife women. Adequate protein, adequate fiber intake, making sure that we're eating nutritious meals and we're not just grabbing a protein bar on the go and 500 calories later we're exhausted. And then moving our bodies. What we really should be doing is lifting heavy weights. And my patients are tired of hearing it, but I'll keep saying it because we're actually seeing improvements in brain health, not
Mm.
just bone health, but cardiovascular disease prevention, Alzheimer's prevention. I heard at a conference recently some really good neuroscientists on women's health talking about that Alzheimer's is really a disease in our 30s and
Mm.
40s, and how we're treating our body now is what's going to happen in 80s and 90s on our brain health. And going back to the basics, I know it sounds so silly, but sleeping, taking care of your body, having mental health checks. If you need a therapist, get one. I think everyone should have a good therapist, right?
I agree.
And not just your best friend, like someone that knows what they're talking about, and is non-biased. So sleep, mental health, nutrition, strength training, just getting back to the basics.
Yes. Well, I love that analogy about teenager because I have been doing a lot of thought around that because for me, teenage puberty, all of that was a very rocky time. Being more aware, of course, at 50 than I was at 14 of what's going on in my body. I'm putting myself to bed earlier and I'm getting
Yeah.
in bed at 9, reading a little bit, no phone, asleep by 9:30. I still
My
love to get up
husband
early,
my
but
husband jokes that I'm in bed usually before our 3-year-old, and I'm like, "That's right, because my sleep is just as important as his," you know?
that's
So,
true. I love that you set
yeah,
that boundary.
I mean, you have to, right?
Why do I crave caffeine like it's going out of style? Because I
Yeah.
did not have this caffeine craving, and I keep hearing as midlife or menopausal women, we need to cut back on the caffeine. But what drives that craving? Do you know?
I think in general, it's just we're exhausted. I'm like, just drink water. Just drink water. I think that if we're fueling our body well and we're moving our body and we have the adequate hormones and all the things to give us that energy back, then we won't be craving as much caffeine.
That's true. I'm sure, yes, it's a coping mechanism for the alertness that I don't have because maybe I'm not doing some of these other things. That makes sense. Let's get into the topic of HRT because that is absolutely something that you know a lot about. Talk about maybe, the timeline of that and what our options are.
What I try to explain to my patients, and I say this over and over, is I am a provider of care. I am not your decider of care. And I think that that is something that gets missed a lot when it comes to hormones. There are practitioners that are very anti hormone replacement therapy. I'm going to argue they're uneducated, and I'm being really bold by saying that.
This is rock the damn boat. That's okay.
And then I think that there are people that are like, oh, you have to be on hormones, you have to be on estrogen. And what I tell everyone, I say, we all deserve an educated conversation about estrogen. And that is then your choice if you choose to be on estrogen therapy or not, right? But if a female comes to me at age 70 and says, no one's talked to me ever about estrogen, that like breaks my heart.
Mm.
Because most of their chronic disease processes could have been prevented at some point. What I usually tell my patients is During perimenopause, my goal of care is to treat your symptoms. Yes, I care about longevity of health and all the things, and I want you to eat well and I want you to lift heavy weights. But when it comes to hormone replacement therapy, I want you to feel good. So if you come to me and you have brain fog or hot flashes, or you're not sleeping, or you're raging and you want to kill your husband or whatever is happening, you want to quit your job, I hear it all, then we should consider hormones. There's no magic blood test to do. We treat the symptoms and we go from there. Now, when it comes to testosterone, I do order baseline labs of testosterone because unlike estrogen and progesterone, where it's literally like a ticking time bomb and it's up and down and up and down and up and down, testosterone kind of like coasts and then it slowly goes down over time for most women. So some women live in a higher testosterone range and some women live in a lower testosterone. So if you come to me and you have no motivation, you have horrible libido, you're exercising and you can't build a muscle, that is a low testosterone patient in my mind. Sometimes brain fog too. And so I'm like, let's get a baseline testosterone and then let's add some if that's what we need to do. So again, in perimenopause, I don't care if you're 35 or 47, you're still having a period. I will treat you based on your symptoms. Now, once you're 12 months, no period, now we're talking about protective reasons to be on hormone therapy, specifically estrogen. We've had it since puberty. So when people tell me I want to do this naturally, I say the most natural thing is to put hormones back in your body. Estrogen is protective to the brain. We have good studies that show that. It is protective to the bones and it is protective to cardiovascular health. And heart disease is the #1 killer of women. I will preach that in my practice till like the day I die, but women don't realize that. They think that hormones are just to get rid of hot flashes. And I'm like, no, they're to protect you because you have had hormones since you were 12 and now you don't. And so we need to protect those organ systems.
You
With
are
that being
educating
said,
me right now because I
yeah.
would be in that camp.
Yeah. And some women feel great. They're like, I'm sleeping fine. My mood's stable. My hot flashes are better. Like you said, like I only had them for a little while and they're
Mhm.
better. So I probably don't need hormones. But you might want them to be protective, right? They also then are good for symptom management. If you're still having mood instability and not sleeping and your energy sucks and all the things, then we should consider hormones too. But there's a difference in how I treat whether you're perimenopausal or menopausal because our end goals are different.
Mm.
I don't get baseline estrogen or progesterone on my menopausal women because they have none. Like I don't need a lab test to tell me they have no estrogen or progesterone. But I do check estrogen to make sure it is therapeutic because there is more and more data telling us there's a special range that our estrogen, which is basically low of a normal range for someone that's cycling. We want to make sure that just because you feel great now that you're 55 and you're menopausal and we have you back on hormones doesn't mean that you're in a therapeutic range to protect your brain and your bones and your heart. So we do want to monitor that too.
Okay, and that gives me a lot of context. I live in a rural area of
Uh-huh.
Texas. There is not a lot of care available to us, but I'm thrilled because my GP has done a lot of follow-ups on hormonal health. We had a very in-depth conversation at my last checkup, and that was one of the things that she talked about was where my range, I'm at the very low end of the range. She
Mhm.
also tested some level that showed that yes, I'm postmenopausal. Combine that with the fact that
Mhm.
it's been a year. So
I usually tell women when you're cycling from the time you have your first period until you have your last period, unless you're pregnant, right? Like your estrogen's in the thousands, but your estradiol level is probably somewhere between 50 and 150. Right? Any given time. And again, another reason I don't check perimenopausal women's estrogen because I don't care what it is now because in 90 minutes it's going to be different. Literally. But when we're menopausal and we're on hormone therapy, we have some good data that says 50 to 70, which is really low. So when people talk about safety, like, is it safe for me to be on hormones? I'm like, girl, it's more safe than not to be on hormones. That low normal range is really where we want to be because when you're menopausal, you're less than 30. You have a little bit of probably measured estrogen, like I said, from cholesterol and fat
mhm.
tissue, but not enough to be protective.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And just like you're saying, you're in Florida, you can treat people in
Mhm.
Florida. There are resources and more doctors and nurse practitioners and functional medicine, like all people learning about this. And it's so important to have that conversation. I went through one of the web-based
Mhm.
services to begin with, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they serve a purpose, but I realize now in what my GP switched me to that the doses were probably all wrong. They don't do any blood work. There's nothing in great detail other than
Yeah.
here's my symptoms and they send you a prescription. I just want to caution my listeners about that as well because there's things like Winona and MIDI Health that I don't know as much about, but just having a real conversation with a real person is very
Yeah.
helpful.
If you go to menopause.org, which is the Menopause Society's national website, they also have a provider listing.
Oh,
Just because they're
great.
on there does not always mean that they're a very educated menopausal provider. But I do think it's a really good place to start. It's listed out by state. So that's the guidance I give, friends and family because they always say, "Can you see my sister in Washington?" Unfortunately, I can't because of the way we're licensed, but that's a really good resource to at least get you guided into something. Even if they're virtual and they're in your state and they can give you some good resources, it's better than no care.
Great. I will put that link in the show notes for
Yeah.
sure. We hear a lot about we have estrogen patches and oral and all of these different things. Can you tell us a little bit about the options?
I can speak to all the different options. Progesterone, I usually say the best way to take progesterone is orally. However, I do have a lot of intolerant patients to progesterone, and they can use it intravaginally if they're having a lot of GI heavy side effects. So, constipation and things like that. They can take that same little, I know it's weird, but that same little capsule and stick it in the vagina, and they absorb it, and it protects the uterus and all the things. Still might have intolerance, and that's when you might want to talk specifically to your provider about changing to a non-progesterone option. That, for the most part, I don't recommend topical progesterones. I don't think they're absorbed really well, and we don't have good safety data on uterine protection. So if you're post-hysterectomy and you want to use topical progesterone and you swear it makes you sleep, I'm all about it. But if you have a uterus, I don't know that it's protecting you from endometrial hyperplasia. So
Mm.
just to be cautious about that, because it is kind of available in like health food stores and stuff. Estrogen, I think oral estrogen gets a bad rap. I like oral estrogen. I prescribe a lot of oral estrogen. If my patients have never had a blood clot or a stroke or a heart attack, or they don't have factor V Leiden, or they've been on birth control before, they can be on oral estrogen and it's really, really cheap. It's a once a day estrogen pill that they take, absorbed really well, and it's one of the best treatments for hot flashes. It's also studied the best. So, all the
Mm.
data that we have for the most part is on oral estrogen. Now, transdermal estrogen, which I do also prescribe a lot of transdermal estrogen just means that the estrogen is absorbed through the skin and it's not taken by mouth. Why does that matter? So, if you are one of those patients, like I just mentioned, you're a high risk for blood clotting. Estrogen by mouth does get processed in the liver and it can increase our risk of clotting. Again, your risk of clotting for the general population is less than if you were pregnant. It's less than if you were
Mm.
on birth control. It's less than if you had surgery, but there could be some patients that just can't be on it. Transdermal estrogen comes in the form of patches, which are either twice a week or once a week. They go on our skin. We live in Florida. A lot of my patients are at the beach and the pool and all the things, and they do fine. Even if you have an adhesive allergy, most of those patients do fine too. Transdermal gel, so it's like a little gel pack that you rub on your thigh or your forearm, and that's a daily dose. And then there's Evamist spray, which is a spray you can put on your skin. There's a lot of compounded forms of these products, usually topical. I usually say go with what insurance will cover and is the
Mm.
cheapest and the safest. And then there's testosterone, which is not FDA approved. And I could talk an hour on this too. It's not FDA. Don't get me started, Christy. But it's not FDA approved for women in this country, although it is approved in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the UK, and they have really good products. So what I traditionally do for my patients is I use a 1% testosterone gel that is FDA approved for men, and we microdose it. We take the same
Mm.
product, and instead of lasting a man a day, it lasts a female 10 days. Little pea size amount. We rub it on our thigh. We have great absorption. There's also injectable forms of estrogen and injectable forms of testosterone available, so that's always an option too. And then there's pellets. Pellets are something that's put into like the backside of you, and it's replaced on average about every 3 to 4 months. It tends to be a little bit costly. I'm not a big advocate of pellets just because I think it makes our blood work really wonky and symptoms wonky, but there are some women that love them.
Yeah, the pellet's gonna terrify me only because I don't have a high threshold for pain, and I don't in my mind that's
Yeah,
but
I don't wanna
I
be cut every 3 months, and if I could just rub something on my skin or take a pill, like, and it's safer, but again, there's some people out there that like it. And
and
there's also something I think that we forget about, but I wanted to mention, so vaginal estrogen. I'm a huge, advocate of talking about vaginal estrogen with women. So the cool thing about vaginal estrogen is that it's not absorbed into the body. So a female that's had breast cancer, someone that's had a stroke, someone that has been told you never can be on estrogen, which I think is a bold statement, can absolutely be on vaginal estrogen. It is really to help with, again, genital urinary syndrome of menopause, vaginal dryness. It is the number one
mm,
prevention for urinary tract infections. It helps with pain with sex, which is called dyspareunia. It helps with incontinence issues when we cough, sneeze,
mm,
laugh, or when we rush to get to the
yes.
bathroom because we can't hold it. It does help with everything pelvic related, prolapse issues. And I think every single female over 40 should be on vaginal estrogen. Now, there are some women that are on maybe oral estrogen and they think their vagina is great and don't have any issues. So be it. But most women that are on hormone replacement, all the things I just mentioned, still should be on a vaginal product. I would say it's like an eye cream and a face cream, right? You
Okay.
gotta target the tissue, and vaginal estrogen is skincare for the vagina.
I'm gonna have to rewatch my own episode and take notes because you're giving such great information. Now,
Good.
if I understand right, you have to take progesterone if you're taking estrogen or using estrogen. Is that correct?
If you
Unless
have a
you're
if you
hysterect.
have a
Yeah.
uterus.
Okay.
So, estrogen by itself in someone that has a uterus can cause what's called endometrial hyperplasia. So, it can thicken the endometrial lining. And when something is thick over time and shouldn't be thick, can cause cancer. What we want to do is we want to keep the endometrial lining of the uterus really thin. And that's what progesterone does. That's actually the only FDA indicated reason to be on progesterone is for endometrial protection for someone that has a uterus. I give progesterone to women that don't have a uterus for its GABA effect and for other
Mm,
reasons.
mm-hmm.
But yes, so if you're on estrogen and you have a uterus, you either need to be on progesterone. Like I said, you could do like the micronized oral progesterone or vaginally. You could have an IUD. So it has to be a progestin IUD. It can't be a copper IUD. It won't protect you. Or there's a product called Duave, which is conjugated estrogen and it's benzodiazepine. So it protects the uterine lining without having a progesterone component to it. So for women
Okay.
that can't tolerate progesterone, that's a great option.
Okay. I feel like I just heard about this, and maybe that was you and I talking because I've gone down the path of doing
Mhm.
some digging on progesterone because unfortunately it had a lot of mood swings and depressive effect,
Mhm.
which from what I understand is not common, but it's
It's not common.
not so unusual that it's unheard of.
Yeah.
And I tend to be every medication I've tried over the last year or so has had the not common side effects. I'm in the 1 to 2% of whatever it
I have a
is.
lot of those patients.
I've been very upfront about anything in the SNRI category I'm
Mhm.
allergic to. And then now with the progesterone. And the unfortunate part was I increased an SSRI dose at the same time I started on a higher progesterone dose. So it was hard
So
to
it's like, which is
discern.
it?
I went, a month with not knowing which was the culprit and then having paused on the HRT. It was like, okay, that was definitely what was happening with me. And I share that because I
Mhm.
know that you would say this too, and everybody I've talked to, it's so unique by individual. Your treatment protocol, what's going to work for you, and if there's any advice you can give women or just, not to give up because it gets
Yeah.
frustrating.
So I think just our medical community and the way medicine is designed makes it really hard for good HRT management. And not every patient can see a provider like me, but I stepped away from corporate medicine because 10 minutes is not enough. I cannot do a pelvic exam or breast exam, see my patient once a year, talk about hormones and lifting and weights and all the things and give them good care. So I think that's part of the problem where we feel rushed or not heard in
Mm.
office visits. And if that means you have to make 3 appointments back to back or see another provider, then I think that's my first recommendation to women is get the care you think you need. If I had one of my sons, I have 4 boys, that needed care and I felt like they weren't getting it, I would go to a different doctor, right? Like we're going
Yeah.
to advocate for them. Why aren't we advocating for ourselves? So that's my first little tidbit on that. Secondly, I like to stack hormones. So what that means is I don't make people come back 3 visits for each hormone and wait months and months, but I do like to say, hey, start progesterone first. Do that for 3 or 4 nights, see how you feel. If you're feeling, maybe no change, but nothing bad, add the estrogen. Do that for a week, add the testosterone. Not everyone needs all hormones, but if someone does need multiple hormones, or that's the plan, do one thing at a time, because if you don't like the way you feel, you want to know what it's from. And not everything metabolizes and works the same in everyone's body. I might do fine on one thing and you might feel terrible. That's always my other recommendation is like, do one thing at a time. And then if you're like, hey, I'm feeling a certain way, go backwards. Come off of the testosterone if you feel like
Hmm.
you're raging with your husband. Give yourself a break and see if it goes away. I think that one thing that can be really frustrating with hormones is it is ebbing and flowing in perimenopause. I really like treating menopausal women because they have no hormones. I can just be like, whatever I'm giving you is gonna add. But we're
Right.
chasing a moving number, and one month might feel really different than the other month. If you choose to start this HRT journey, it's okay to be like, I don't feel good on that dose, or I don't like the way that product is. Like, I don't think the gel's helping me. Let's switch to an oral form, or can we check some labs and see if anything's absorbing? Like, that's all fine. And it could take 6 months to a year, unfortunately, for women to be like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, I feel amazing. That's not my goal, but it's, immediately, but that's not always the case.
Right. When I very first started, I started progesterone first, and I remembered reaching out to via the app and saying, I'm kind of irritable on this.
Something's
And
off.
and again, it was like, well, that's not typical. Let's start the estrogen. Okay, we started that. And then it kind of subsided and got masked by other symptoms. And then when I took the increased dose of progesterone, it was like,
Mhm.
whoa, something's wrong here. We know our body's best. What I love too is that we're all talking about this now. And
Yeah.
especially because I'm 50, my friends are in my age group, and we're all going through this together. And because we're willing to talk about it, and we're having this conversation today to help educate women, because then okay, I'm feeling a little off on this, and you're not necessarily going to go out and do exactly what your friend's doing, but you might learn
Yes.
about more options. You mentioned the testosterone shot, and I remembered that a friend mentioned that the other day. So that's what
Mhm.
she's doing. I think that that's a way that we can continue to just bring it out in the open. My mom had a hysterectomy very young, so she didn't go through all of this. Just appreciate that you are giving this specific type of care to women and having this conversation. It's incredible.
And I kind of see women after the fact. Again, I'm a cash-based practice. People aren't rushing to see me because they're paying out of pocket unless their friends recommended or something like that. By the time I see patients, they've already been dismissed by their GP. Their GYN told them they're too young or too old to be on hormones. I mean, I kind of see this unique patient population for the most part. And what I tell women is you just have to advocate for yourself. I think we're really, really good at advocating for other people, and we forget we can also advocate for ourselves. And it's okay to fire your GYN that you've seen for 30 years. People think, oh my gosh, like I don't even want to request my records. They're going to find out I'm leaving their practice. It's your care, And one, I don't think one number is going to matter that much to them.
Right.
It is what it is. But you have to get the care that you deserve. And if you feel like that it's suboptimal, then you just need to find another resource because the care is out there. It's just a little tricky right now until a lot of people are educated on how to prescribe and do all the things.
Yes. That is the rock the damn boat mic drop right there. We are suggesting that you rock the damn boat about your care. I have so many of my listeners were people pleasers, and yeah,
I'm a people
you
pleaser too. I mean, I get it,
got
and
to put yourself
yeah,
first. There is a quality of life that can be found. I'm on this mental health journey at the same time. I'm on this hormone journey, and
mm,
my mental changes were a little bit more than just the typical brain fog. And I'm
yes.
figuring out what that anxiety and stuff looks like at age 50. And it reached a crescendo for me where I was like, okay, I'm at my breaking point.
Well, and that's a symptom I didn't talk too much about, but anxiety is real. Age is real. Women come to me and they're like, I'm going to throat punch someone. And I'm like, I haven't heard that said very often. Or like, I'm raging. Who says
Yes.
that? My patients do. Or someone that has always dealt with anxiety. Now they are like, this is different. I don't want to travel and I love to travel. I'm scared to drive in the car. I'm like worried all the time. Like, this isn't the anxiety I've had since I was 14. Everyone is really uniquely different. And that's why at the very beginning, when you asked me, what is a sign or symptom of perimenopause? When a patient comes to me and says, I don't feel like me and I feel like something's off, that is perimenopause. That's the best way to
Yes.
say it. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. I'm that way with exercise. I know I should be lifting heavy. I used to have a fitness Instagram account, and I've been in the gym off and on my entire life, and I dread the thought now. So I do little 10-minute bursts. I'll go
Mhm.
out there and I'll lift a heavy weight for 12 reps and 5 different things. And if that's all I can do for the day, it's better than nothing.
I keep my weights in my bedroom and I do them in my pajamas sometimes because it counts. You don't have to put on cute gym clothes and be in a gym setting or in a group fitness class. Do what works in your life.
Yes, we've got to fit it into our life
Mhm.
to make it work. And at this age, you're busy, you're a mom, you're up in your career. I had a yoga studio, and attendance kept dwindling because people can't make time for fitness and
Yeah.
mindfulness, and it's so important. I'm trying to walk that walk, and I was doing push-ups during an online meeting yesterday where I didn't have to be on camera.
Yeah, I love it. I have a patient who she told me I can never go to the gym. Her daughter does competitive cheer, and she's like, we're at my daughter's cheer practices 2 hours every night. And I said, then put them in the trunk of your car and do them in the parking lot. At some point, we are making excuses, and I get it. Life happens. Trust me, I get it. But we got to be creative, right? Like, we got to figure out how to mold to this new life that we have. And it might not look like yoga at 7 a.m. and a very pretty meal prepped meal that day. It has to be flowing with what our day looks like, but we still got to take care of our health because when we're 80 and 90, right, we don't want to break a hip and not age well. And so that's our goal
Yes.
now.
How long does HRT last? Is it something you take for 5 years, 10 years, forever?
If you have your ovaries, we know that the ovaries produce a little bit of estrogen probably until about age 65. So if someone asks me, Ashley, I'm going to have a hysterectomy, should I keep my ovaries? If they look healthy and you're under 65, yes. And you don't have any other strong family history to have them removed, then yes, keep them, right? Because they can help you a little bit. After the age of 65, they pretty much are doing nothing. The reason I tell you that is because most women, like I said, are going to hit menopause somewhere around age 50, 51. Some people earlier, some people
Yep.
later. If we choose to just stop our HRT, that little bit of estrogen in your ovaries is not carrying the weight.
Mm,
If we're trying to long term protect brain, bone, heart health, along with, again, we might feel great when we're in menopause. We like those mood swings might be gone because now we're at rock bottom, but we're stable at rock bottom, right? So as long as we're still trying to be protective, we should stay on HRT, and that's different for everyone, for as long as the benefits outweigh the risks. Could be forever.
I love that you're shedding the light on all these benefits because, again, thinking of going natural, and this is what my body's doing naturally. But to your point, that was only 13, 14 years of my life versus the next 40 where I had estrogen. So,
Yeah, the
I,
average patient will live about 40% of their life in menopause. Average life expectancy is early 80s for a female in the US, and then menopause is about 51. A long time. Does every single woman need estrogen? or should be on estrogen? No. But again, they should have an educated conversation about what are the risks, benefits, etc. The point to that, what I always tell patients when they say, well, we were made to not have estrogen after a certain point. I'm like, we also weren't designed to live as long as we live.
That's
So
true.
yeah, the female body is really designed to have babies, and that's about it. If you look at men, they have estrogen and testosterone until they die. 2/3 of Alzheimer's cases and dementia cases are women, and we think it's directly related to estrogen and testosterone levels.
Wow.
Now, yes, we will have some testosterone probably until we die, but very, very low amounts and no estrogen. And how is that protective long term?
That, again, great explanation, because that's one thing that my husband always teases about. We think about all these problems that we
Yeah,
have in older age, but the Wild West wasn't all that long ago, and you died from dysentery and in childbirth and all
absolutely.
of these things. So yes, it's a blessing to get to enjoy more years on this planet, but obviously we can supplement with hormones to help that quality of life improve.
Women tend to have more chronic disease processes later in life. Men tend to live much healthier lives later in life, but women don't. And I'm not here to convince anyone to be on HRT. I think it's completely everyone's decision. My grandma always says, I never even went through menopause. And I'm like, lady, you're in menopause. My point of saying all of this is if you look at health as a whole, and our goal is to age well and live healthy and be able to be active when I'm 80. I want to live independently. I don't want to be in an assisted living facility. Those kinds of things, that's where what we're doing now, perimenopause and early menopause, matter.
I appreciate that point of view, and all of the things that you
Yeah,
have informed my listeners about. You've tried your best to package it into this, 45-minute conversation. Of course, it's a huge topic and people
absolutely.
can learn more. I will definitely link the resource that you shared where they can find practitioners or providers in their area and do some research. Ask friends for referrals. Surprisingly, just for the limited resources we have in my area, we have a wonderful doctor who is very well versed in hormonal health. So you never
Awesome.
know where you
Yeah.
could find someone. I have so enjoyed this conversation, and I love
Thank you
seeing
so
you
much.
on your socials. People can follow along because you're always making videos and sharing information with the public, even if they aren't in Florida.
Absolutely. That's my goal is just the more we can educate and then one female can educate another and just kind of get the conversations going. That's what I hope is going to really start pushing providers to want to be educated and trained in hormonal health. And then hopefully future generations like medical schools and PA and NP programs will start teaching this knowledge so that it's not so foreign to everyone.
Yes. And just in case someone doesn't grab the show notes, it's Instagram and Facebook that you're most active
Yes.
on?
So my practice is called Pausitive, like menopause, Pausitive, women's care. And I have an Instagram and a Facebook profile.
Excellent. That is
Yeah.
where I follow along. Well, I like to close the show by asking my guests who their boat rocking role model is. So, as a people pleaser, you might have someone that stands out as like, oh, yes, she's a boat rocker. Who do you admire?
I know this sounds so cliche, but my mom is for sure a boat rocker. She just constantly inspires me to speak up and speak out and have hard conversations if you need to have them because doing what you're passionate about and what your heart says is right versus wrong is the way you should do it.
Wonderful. A lot of people say their moms. It's
Yeah,
funny, my mom was taught not to rock the boat. We talk about being a lineage of people pleasers, but that's where I'm trying to help those of us who do need to use our voice and empower our voice. And you have been so incredibly knowledgeable today. So thank you so
of
much for
course.
joining the
I'm so
show.
happy to be on. I hope that it's been helpful.
Absolutely. And thank you to all the listeners for joining us for this conversation.
Bye. Take care.
You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.